Hollywood loves jets, but only a handful of movies ever got real military hardware, real pilots, and actual flight crews involved. One had the Navy flying combat maneuvers just for the cameras. Another paid millions to film inside a real aircraft carrier. These are the only jet movies even real pilots actually respect. Jet Pilot is a Cold War adventure with one of the goofiest premises you'll see from that era. Produced by Howard Hughes, it's got John Wayne as Colonel Jim Shannon, a U.S. Air Force pilot assigned to escort a surprise Soviet defector, a glamorous female fighter pilot. He's supposed to get information out of her but ends up falling in love. But then she's accused of being a spy, and to prove her innocence, Shannon actually steals a jet and flies her back to Siberia. It sounds ridiculous, and it is, but that's not why pilots respect it. Jet Pilot was shot right at the dawn of the jet age, so they used actual frontline U.S. Air Force jets. There's F-86 Sabres from the 1st Fighter Group and T-33 Shooting Stars, standing in as Soviet planes. And they even managed to feature the Bell X-1 rocket plane. Hughes spared no expense filming the flying sequences. Most of the aerial footage was shot at Edwards Air Force Base with real jets and real air crews. And test pilot Chuck Yeager, the first man to break the sound barrier, actually flew many of the aerobatic stunts for the film. None of it helped, though. When it finally released, Jet Pilot bombed at the box office and critics ripped it apart for a silly mix of romance and Cold War propaganda. Even John Wayne later said the story made no sense. But if you want to see authentic flying, this is the one to watch. There's early jets in action, absolutely beautiful Technicolor aerial shots, and stunts performed by real pilots. Strategic Air Command takes a completely different approach. A movie built around the real life of Cold War bomber crews and filmed with total access to the Air Force's biggest toys. James Stewart stars as Dutch Holland, a former war pilot and pro baseball player. He gets called back into service when Strategic Air Command needs experienced men. He gives up his career and family time to command America's new nuclear bombers. First the gigantic B-36 Peacemaker, then the jet-powered B-47 Stratojet. Strategic Air Command worked directly with the Air Force to make sure every detail was right. The flying scenes aren't models or effects. They're the real B-36 and B-47 bombers in the sky, with full crews going through actual flight procedures. There are in-depth sequences showing pre-flight checks, crew briefings, Arctic navigation, and even a mid-air refueling. There's a scene with a real KB-29 tanker linking up with a B-47, shot in full VistaVision color. When Strategic Air Command hit theaters in 1955, it actually had a real-world impact. Air Force enlistment jumped by 25%. People saw those 6-engine B-36 and sleek B-47s in action and signed up, and I totally get why. For anyone who wants to see real military jets on screen, this is essential viewing. Flight of the Intruder is about as close as Hollywood's gotten to the real world of Navy attack pilots during Vietnam. Set in 1972, the story follows Lieutenant Jake Grafton, an A-6 Intruder pilot flying missions off an aircraft carrier. After losing his bombardier on a pointless run, Grafton teams up with a new partner, Lieutenant Cole, and they decide to go off script. An unauthorized strike deep into enemy territory, targeting a missile depot in Hanoi they believe might actually matter. What really sets this one apart is how much access the production got to the actual U.S. Navy. The Navy went all in. There's real A-6 Intruders from the USS Independence, repainted in Vietnam-era colors, flown by actual naval aviators. 285 hours of flight time were logged just for the movie. They shot on board the Independence with over 1,000 real sailors working as extras. The cast trained with real pilots, did water survival drills, even got taken up in jets to feel real G-forces. Unfortunately, all that realism didn't translate to box office success. Flight of the Intruder made about $14.6 million on a budget close to $35 million. Critics weren't impressed. Most called the story cliched, the dialogue flat, the tone uneven. But among real pilots, this movie holds a special place. It's one of the only films that ever put the A-6 Intruder front and center. Air Force One is a whole different story, a big-budget Hollywood thriller that still managed to get the details right. The premise is simple: terrorists hijack the president's plane. Harrison Ford plays President James Marshall, a former soldier who decides he's not going to negotiate. Instead, he turns into a one-man army, fighting the hijackers from inside his own Boeing 747 at 30,000 feet. For authenticity, the filmmakers went all out. They rented a real Boeing 747 from Kalitta Air, repainted it in presidential colors, and shot actual exterior sequences with it. When it came to fighter jets, the U.S. Air Force stepped in. Real F-15C Eagles from the 33rd Fighter Wing were used for the movie's big dogfight. They show up as the escort pilots trying to protect Air Force One. No wonder Air Force One was a massive hit. It pulled in over $315 million worldwide and became one of the most popular action movies from the 90s. Even then, President Bill Clinton saw it twice and gave it his personal stamp of approval. This one is a Cold War techno-thriller starring Clint Eastwood. He plays Mitchell Gant, a U.S. fighter pilot on a Black Ops mission deep inside the Soviet Union. His target is one-of-a-kind MiG-31 jet, codenamed Firefox, that's supposedly decades ahead of anything in the West. None of the hardware in the movie was real, but they went all in on making it look legit. Eastwood's team built huge models of the Firefox jet and even a full-size 66-foot-long replica that could actually drive around set at 30 to 40 miles an hour. They even shot scenes at Thule Air Base in Greenland, passing it off as a secret Soviet Arctic base. For the flying shots, they hired legendary pilot Clay Lacy, who flew a Learjet rigged with cameras just to get real background skies. When Firefox came out, the reaction was mixed. Critics weren't sold on the story or the pacing. The New York Times said it was only slightly more suspenseful than it is plausible. Ronald Reagan, though, screened it at Camp David and thought it was darn good. Years after the original, Tom Cruise comes back as Maverick, now a Navy test pilot called in to train a fresh batch of Top Gun pilots for a high-risk mission. It's practically a full-on Navy recruitment film, but with real access nobody's ever had before. The U.S. Navy handed over actual Boeing Super Hornets. For the first time, filmmakers put IMAX-grade cameras inside the cockpits while Navy pilots flew the jets for real. Cruise personally made every actor go through flight training to handle G-forces, so when you see those faces getting smashed by the turns, it's real. They shot on the USS Theodore Roosevelt, an active aircraft carrier, filmed real catapult launches and landings. The Navy billed $11,000 an hour for the jets. Not cheap, but you can't fake the footage they got. Navy aviators said the flight scenes were as close as you'll ever see to the actual experience. Behind Enemy Lines starts with the Bosnia conflict as a backdrop. Lieutenant Chris Burnett, played by Owen Wilson, is a U.S. naval flight officer who gets shot down during a recon run over Bosnia. His 18F Super Hornet takes a surface-to-air hit, he ejects, and suddenly he's alone, behind enemy lines. The whole movie is Burnett dodging Serbian paramilitaries and a sniper, armed with nothing but a sidearm and whatever survival instincts he's got. Back on the carrier, Gene Hackman plays his commander, who ends up launching a rescue mission, ignoring NATO orders. The U.S. Navy actually helped make this movie. Aircraft carrier scenes were shot on the real USS Carl Vinson, with extra interiors done on USS Constellation. The Navy provided actual carrier flight ops footage and gave the filmmakers access to naval facilities, though with one big catch. The Pentagon demanded the script show the Navy and its chain of command in a positive light. That's why, even though Hackman's admiral goes rogue, the ending finds a political workaround to keep everyone's reputation clean. The script is only loosely based on reality. It borrows elements from the 1995 shootdown of Captain Scott O'Grady over Bosnia, but O'Grady's real story is completely different. He flew an F-16, survived by hiding for 6 days, never got into ground combat, and his rescue happened without movie-style heroics. The movie took so many liberties, O'Grady ended up suing Fox for misusing his story. They settled out of court. Based on James Michener's novel, which drew from actual Korean War events, this one follows Lieutenant Harry Brubaker. He's a Navy Reserve pilot pulled back into action to lead a mission against heavily defended bridges in North Korea. The production leaned hard on authenticity. The U.S. Navy gave full access. Actual Grumman F-9F Panther jets from active squadrons flew the missions, just like in the real Korean War. Carrier operations, takeoffs, landings, all those sequences were filmed on real deployments aboard the USS Oriskany and USS Kearsarge. They even shot with a Sikorsky rescue helicopter, the same type used in actual rescues back then. The Navy led actors and crew onto live ships in the middle of wartime conditions, and everything from the routines to the tension on deck came across as real. The Navy's only requirement was accuracy and respect, and the movie delivered. Meixner's interviews with pilots and the use of real stories made sure nothing felt fake. Pilots who flew in that era said the bridges at Toko-Ri got it all right. The technical details, the emotional reality, the feel of what it meant to be on a carrier in wartime.